My name is Ami Vitale, and I'm a photographer and filmmaker, and I get to travel the world. I can't believe it. I have to pinch myself often to tell really powerful stories that hopefully will make a difference. For me, photography has become this incredible tool to creating awareness and hopefully understanding, and that's why I do it. That's what motivates me. And now it's been this amazing journey of not just empowering myself, but empowering other people. And now I feel I'm in this really privileged position. It's also a huge responsibility to do justice to the stories we're telling and the people we're talking about. For me, it's not just about traveling and exploring, which is great and a piece of it, but actually, it's so much more than that. I'm looking for those stories that show intimacy, that tell something about these people I'm photographing, something that you might not already know. And I do think there's an incredible responsibility. We need to educate lots of people about being responsible to the people who are in front of our camera too. I think there's a couple things to great photography, and one of them, probably the most important thing, is empathy. Empathy is key. Without it, I don't know what it's about. You've got to be able to try to put yourself in the shoes of other people and feel what they might be going through to really, really get to some kind of truth. Whether that's possible, I don't know, but for me, the most important factor in what we do. So I do travel to a lot of different cultures, different religions, different food, different language. And the thing that I think is most important to realize is you don't focus on the differences. You focus on what unites and binds us, rather than the exotic. Ultimately, that's what allows other people to relate to the story, to have an interest in it. The first thing I do before I even get off the plane is research. I learn as much as I can before I even land. I read local newspapers, many are online. I connect with people living there. I try to find local journalists or just through friends, people who might know something about this place. And cultural sensitivities, very important. That actually is through knowledge, and also even just your appearance can really be important. So I definitely pay attention to those sensitivities and try to dress modestly, for example, or if a headscarf is important, I have that. The other thing is not to be afraid. People actually all over the world are wonderful. And if you trust in the kindness of strangers, it is real. And the more I travel, the more I learn, and the more I realize how little I know. And that's a really beautiful thing. Finding the connections with people is pretty simple, actually. I think a lot of it is how you personally view the camera. I don't view it as this weapon. It can be very abrasive, but it's all about how you approach people and what you do with your work. And so I often go to places and I always give images back to people, always. And today we can email them in most places. It's so easy, even in the most remote place. Often people will be connected, and I meet the most incredible people in the most unlikely places who constantly surprise me. People are resilient, people are powerful. They're not that image that we see or believe in our own minds and imagination. Our imagination can be dangerous, but when you get on the ground and absolutely connect with people, most of the time, 99% of the time, it's a privilege to be doing what we do. And sometimes I think a little pain, a little suffering is a good thing if it creates empathy. I also think time is a really critical, essential piece. If you want to do storytelling, time is very important to understand your story and actually let the story emerge instead of coming in with your own preconceptions about people and a place. Because they start revealing things you could never have even imagined. And suddenly it's really their story and what's important to them. And that just takes time. So whatever I'm working on, I really try to give myself sometimes years on a story, because you start understanding that getting depth is all about really patience and time. If you're looking for inspiration, sometimes it's like just spend a year on one story, on one project with one person, and over time, that story, it may not seem so important at first, but time often makes it more soulful, more important, and you have depth to it. Also, I think that you don't often have time. You know, in today's world, you really don't. So find a personal project that you can devote time to, and every weekend devote a certain amount of time to it. Find a story in your backyard. You do not have to travel across the world to tell great stories. In fact, the best stories are in your backyard. That's just because you can go deep in them. I don't like parachuting into places. Sometimes I have to. And there are things you can do when you are sent on an assignment and have to parachute in. And what I like to do is, when I first arrive to a place, is put the camera down and have real conversation with people. Really listen. Listening is also really important. And then before I press that camera up against my face, I really try to engage first and understand as much as I can about that person I'm working with. And then I develop that relationship, and I also pick the moments when I want to photograph. Don't always be on the hunt looking for your picture. You need to slow down mentally and find the key moments, because if you always have that camera up against your face, you miss so much. The other thing is, never assume anything about anybody wherever you go. You know, sometimes you'll travel to this really remote place. Maybe they have never seen a camera, but you never know that. People are savvy, people are smart, and I think it's just never assume. That's really, really important. And understand that the pictures you take, they very well may see them. And so being responsible and letting them know, yes, I may put this on the internet, super important. Don't just assume because you're in a remote place that they'll never see it. I discovered recently your images can be really misused. And I woke up one morning recently to find a couple of my images had been spread all over the internet to illustrate the Bring Back Our Girls campaign, the girls that were kidnapped in Nigeria. And while I really empathize and relate to the frustration of the Nigerians that the world wasn't paying attention, taking somebody else's image of girls from a country far away who have nothing to do with this is not okay. These are real people who can absolutely be impacted by this. We live in this very connected world now. So I woke up and realized that I needed to do something. At this point, it had been shared everywhere. Even the BBC was retweeting it. And I had to, in 140 characters on Twitter, try to get these images pulled down, try to explain to everybody, please take these images down. And their first response was, why? They've already been retweeted tens of thousands of times. What can you possibly do now? Well, it didn't stop me. I felt really compelled to try to do as much as I could. I kept retweeting and eventually getting in touch with everybody I could. I called the New York Times, I got the story out there, and the images started coming down. The other thing I realized is that you don't have to feel powerless. You actually, as the copyright holder, can legally have everything removed from the internet. So if people don't agree to take it down on their own, you can actually forcefully have it taken down, which is what I had to do. So now I use technology to help myself. I find out where images of mine are being used all over the internet through Google reverse image search, and I get them taken down. But the good news is you don't have to feel hopeless. There's actually a lot we can do. It starts with copywriting your images and taking control of them. So I can relate to people who are incredibly shy and don't want to get out there with their camera. It can feel really icky sometimes, like you're invading people's space. And I just want to say that I relate to that, and I think that the way to get over that is to take that first step. Take your camera out, and a lot of that feeling you're projecting onto other people. So if you can just sort of practice and gently ask people, may I take your picture? And you'll get rejected sometimes, but it's just a matter of practicing and forcing yourself to get out there and realizing it's all in your approach. And we're all born into different bodies. And even if you're a big, burly guy, if you approach people in a gentle way, you'll be surprised. You'll be absolutely surprised and be genuinely curious and kind to people. I consider myself more of a people photographer, but I moved to Montana, and it's a very wild place. And now I find that I am photographing not just people, but wildlife too. And it's been this wonderful journey because turns out people and wildlife, there's so many similarities. So the lessons I've learned are, when you're photographing wildlife, you basically have to be really slow and still and patient and quiet. And I found that eventually the animals start coming to me. I'll show pictures. I even have pictures of cows. I just sat down and a whole herd of calves slowly walked up to me. I have this wonderful moment of all of them just curiously looking at me. Same thing with people. If you just stay in one place and just wait for life to go by, they're going to notice you and they're slowly going to come and check you out and ask what you're doing. And then the lessons are absolutely there. The other thing is, with wildlife, you don't really want to stare at them. And if you do, put one hand over your eye, because they view you as a predator. So being too aggressive and coming on too strongly in the beginning will terrify any animal and any person too. No matter who you are, whether you're maybe just wanting to take pictures of your family's vacation, or you're a professional, or you dream of working for National Geographic, as you go out into the world, just think of a couple principles. One is empathy. Two, there's this universal truth, and look for the things that connect us rather than simply the things that divide us, because those are stories and they're universal. Everybody can relate to them. The other thing is, don't let the technology stop you. It is overwhelming. There's so many big tools we can be using, but just keep it simple. Just don't let the camera get in the way between you and your story, and you and the people or animals in front of you. It's important to know the basics on your camera, but don't let it overwhelm you. So go out and have fun, and if you ever want to get in touch, I'm happy to answer questions, and you can always reach me through social media. Thanks so much for watching.